Mage Storytime, Episode 8, Saints and Sinners. This is the continuing story of the Iron Goldfish, a party of role-players who awakened as mages. Our cast includes Alwi, who manipulates time with his phone; Bard, a mind and spirit mage who uses superheroes as his gods; Critical, who improves the luck of others through his own pain; Handy, a correspondence-using thief who steals items at long range; Kitty, who empowered his stickers and cats with spirits; Tello, a postmodern mage who uses a hodgepodge of skills to manipulate forces and matter; and Weeb, who uses his life skills to enhance his martial arts and Chinese medicine. Having survived the attack by the technocracy agents, we spent much of the interim time licking our wounds. Metaphorically, we're not werewolves. We were puzzled by how the technocracy kept finding us. After much investigation and some paranoid discussions regarding possible traitors and moles, it was eventually determined that Handy's familiar Dave, the magical talking sword, which he never used because Dave was both annoying and a strict pacifist, had been tweeting about our adventures with far too much detail. Apparently, one of his half-dozen followers was the MIB. Dave was given a stern talking to about the virtues of vagueness and identity protection, and was forced from then on to tweet misinformation to confuse our enemies. It didn't have much effect, so far as we could tell, but we didn't suffer any secondary attacks by the technocracy. At least, not physically. The shop, which had been doing fairly well for being in a niche market, was suddenly inundated with fees, fines, and bureaucratic red tape. Nothing major, but a lot of nickel and diming from various agencies and regulatory bodies. Most of us shrugged this off as the cost of doing business, but Weeb, having become understandably paranoid, insisted that it was a subversive attack by the technocracy. During our convalescence, Critical and Bard finally discovered some members of the Celestial Chorus tradition, the approximate mage equivalent of clerics and paladins, and had scored an invite to their meeting place for a solstice festival. They were more than happy to have guests. As it turned out, for all their secrecy, the traditions all wanted to recruit new members as often as possible, and so tended to be friendly to unaligned wizards and other potential initiates. Kind of like a college fraternity during rush season. Handy, too, had been busy winning friends and influencing people, and had gotten a similar invitation to an Order of Hermes affair. The Order of Hermes were the more traditional mages, with lots of circles and pentagrams and magical elixirs and formulae and stuff. If you think of any famous wizarding school, you're probably thinking of the Hermetics. Both of these sounded like good places to start gaining allies, and thus protection from any more technocratic attacks. Or at least more powerful wizards to call on to save our butts. We weren't sure which one to go to, but we decided that having only half of our crew show up would be considered an insult. So, since it was 2-to-1 on interested party members, we opted to visit the Celestial Chorus first, and sent our RSVP to them and our apologies to the Order of Hermes. There was only one problem. Up to now, we had been using our real names to deal with people, but all 3 of our investigating party members had quickly learned that using real names was at best considered gauche, and at worst opened the door to domination and control by another supernatural. Generally, the policy was to use a nickname or handle. We brought this idea back to the group and set about determining nicknames. We knew that generally the name was based on some great deed or attribute. The first and most obvious was Handy, as we were still mocking him over his accidentally amorous misadventure with a technocracy agent the previous week. Finally, we settled on the following names. Handy, because of the aforementioned grabbing of the MIB's crotch. Alwi, the first word of the phrase Alwi Diectiones, which, according to our very poor Latin, translated roughly as explosive diarrhea, based on his experience as Officer Karen. Weeb, because he was a massive weeaboo, and because he was using his magic to slowly transform into an anime protagonist. Bard, because of his use of music to empower us, and because he hated the Bard class in D&D for unspecified reasons. Critical, mostly because of the way he rolled nat 20s all the time in D&D, but also for his ability to alter fate. Kitty, our newest member, who had learned to imbue his cats and his Hello Kitty stickers with magical properties. And Tello, short for Tello Teleo, a Latin phrase which she claimed meant the end complete, or the final end, because she wanted to be deep, and because she hadn't done anything embarrassing enough to earn a better nickname. Before we could go to any fancy parties, however, we decided to check out the last node we knew about and see if we could gain some more resources. Maybe that would lend us more importance at the Celestial Chorus soiree. We waited until later in the evening, when the moon was rising, and headed to the Dallas suburb of Sunnyvale. The park where the spirits had told us the node was located was a small, municipal greenbelt almost across the street from a dump. It didn't take us long to locate the node. Tello's spirit connections were pretty reliable. Tello was bothered by the dump's closeness to the park, but the rest of us, as native Texans, were unfazed. Besides, we pointed out, it would be a literal gold mine for us. If we set up in the area, we could take literally anything from the park and turn it to gold for a tidy profit. Given our mediocre track record with werewolves so far, we were a little anxious about meeting the pack we had heard hung around this node, so we left a letter. Tello penned a brief missive introducing ourselves, mentioning the pack of bone gnawers we had worked with successfully, while tactfully avoiding any admission of domestic terrorism, and asked for a meeting to discuss fighting Bane spirits. We left that with a 6-pack of beer and a business card for our shop and settled down to wait. We didn't have to wait long. The next day, a large, gruff voice called and invited us to join them on the next new moon at the Sunnyvale node. The voice said they were always happy to meet new nightfolk. Fighting Bane spirits was never dull, and that they looked forward to meeting us. We were pleasantly surprised and made arrangements to meet at the new moon, which just so happened to fall on the summer solstice this year. The Hermetic and Chorister feasts were scheduled for the following day, conveniently enough. The night of the solstice, we pulled into the park and set up at one of the barbecues with cookout paraphernalia. As a sort of cover, we started grilling burgers and hot dogs and generally having a normal summer gathering. As the evening drew on, the pack showed up in ones and twos. Of the 7 people that joined us, 3 of them were clearly werewolves. Between their imposing stature and the masses of hair, they couldn't be anything but. We learned that the others were called kinfolk, children or relatives of werefolk that didn't go through the change. But they knew about the Guru and were a vital part of their society. And apparently some of the dogs hanging around were canine kinfolk. We nodded politely, learning a lot about werewolves and doing our best to keep our mouths shut so we didn't say anything stupid and offend anyone again. Overall, though, the pack was remarkably friendly. They were even willing to help us out with our Bane problem. But there was one catch. They wanted us to go through a ritual that would essentially make us honorary members of the tribe. Before the largest one, who was speaking, could finish that thought, Bard, Weeb, and all we jumped to their feet. "We're in! Who do we have to kill?" Funny. There's nothing like that. I don't think you heard us. Who do we have to kill? While the 3 mages tried to fulfill their childhood dreams of being werewolves, and the rest of the party was just happy no one was trying to kill us, Tello began to get suspicious. As the wolves described the ritual that they wanted us to partake in, called the Black Spiral Dance, Tello started trying to look up the phrase that she swore sounded familiar. Weeb, Bard, and Critical had all heard the term in passing, but attached no significance to it. But Tello had been looking in the right lore books and finally remembered that the Black Spiral was a location in the Worm's realm, where werewolves, mages, and other people went in and got their souls turned inside out. This pack, the Black Spiral Dancers, were servants of the Worm. Thinking quickly, Tello texted Marco, who had been left in charge of the Iron Goldfish shop while we were out, and instructed him to set off the alarm system. Now. Moments later, we were all alerted by the SOS alarm from the shop. Tello exclaimed, "Oh no, we have to go." Now. No time to delay. Emergency. Bye. The rest of us made much more polite farewells and promised to return the next month to actually take part in the ritual. The werewolves accepted our excuses. Everyone in the party except Tello legitimately believed there was an emergency. Tello had the good taste to wait until we were safely back at the shop to tell us how she had saved not only our lives, but our very souls, and how we all owed her big. We agreed, and each thanked our respective gods that we had made it out alive. We thought of trying to go back and fight the Black Spiral Dancers for control over the node, but we quickly decided that the 9-foot-tall furry murder machines would probably kill us horribly, especially given the trouble we had had with one vampire. So instead, we sent polite letters to the Bone Gnawers pack in Frisco and the Glasswalkers pack near White Rock Lake, informing them of the location of their mortal enemies at a park in Sunnyvale. Both groups thanked us for the information and assured us they would work together to clean out the vermin shortly. So we filed the Black Spiral Dancers under solved, or at least under no longer our problem. Having narrowly avoided losing our souls, our next move was to go to church to see if a bunch of magical preachers could save or steal them. The location of the Celestial Chorus Party was one of the older and grander churches located in Highland Park, a rich, upper-class city nestled in the middle of Dallas. Given the location, we opted to dress formally. The church itself was familiar to Bard, as he was a, probably heretical, member of it. He even knew one of the tradition's mages, a tall white guy with dreadlocks and sandals who looked like a Caucasian hippie Jesus. He and Bard knew each other well before Bard awakened, and our party member had been surprised to learn that his friend was also a mage. He had been our primary contact for the chorus, and went out of his way to be friendly and welcoming, even when a cantankerous Tello insisted that she was an atheist, or at least agnostic. He was open and warm. Several of the party were surprised by this, as we had expected some sort of religious fundamentalism based off of rumors and hearsay. But apparently there were also some more liberal-minded universalist types in the chorus. Bard's friend took us inside, insisting that anyone who served the One was welcome, whether they believed in God or gods or nothing of the sort. Entering the main meeting/dining hall, we saw several dozen people of all types and faiths wearing name tags, holding drinks, and mingling. The only thing separating it from a normal business mixer were the names on the tags or being bandied about. We saw a few shepherds and zealots, as well as a number of Pauls, Mohammeds, and Moishas. We were glad we had decided on appropriate handles, as we each grabbed a cocktail or juice and began trying to mingle. Bard, being socially awkward, hung around his contact in the corner talking about the advantages of membership in the Celestial Chorus, which mostly boiled down to access to the tradition's massive library and to mentors for every sphere of magic, which was a pretty nice advantage. Critical also touched base with his contact, a proselytizer named Doug, whom he had met at work. Tello similarly avoided conversation with strangers, spending the evening standing in a corner and judging the occupants of the room. She didn't get on well with elitists or religious types, and the location alone was elite and religious enough to put her on edge. After a while, a tall, cadaverous preacher walked over and stood a few feet away from her without making any attempt at conversation. He stood there, staring at the party and quietly sipping his drink. By the end of the night, 5 or 6 party-hating people had joined Tello in the corner, and they were having a wonderful antisocial time together, silently drinking their drinks and hating the party as a group of strangers. Weeb, as he was walking around, noticed a tall, stern man with a cleric's collar. The man had a square jaw, a salt and pepper crew cut, and the kind of mustache that a kind person would say looked like Charlie Chaplin's. He looked not unlike someone who would demand pictures of a certain wall-crawling superhero. Weeb, lacking good sense or adult supervision, pulled up one of the pictures on his phone and handed it to the man. "What the heck is this?" he growled, remembering he was in a church. "You think this is funny? Do you just walk up and insult everyone? Did I come up to you and say your mother looks like Babar?" That comment caused Weeb to lose it, and he doubled over laughing while the stern preacher stomped away. Aloe tried to stop him and ask about a greenish hobgoblin, but the man ignored him. Bard and Critical facepalmed in the background. Fortunately, As the evening wore on, Alwi and Weeb ran out of obvious targets to antagonize and were quickly distracted by the snack table. Plus, eating meant they couldn't talk, so the rest of us made sure to keep them well supplied with treats. After a while, Alwi heard a Middle Eastern man talking about time magic and began to gravitate towards him, hoping to learn more. It was then that he turned on what the rest of us referred to as Work Alwi, and without warning started pouring on the charm and suavity such that we barely even recognized him as the same person. He was quickly entertaining the more accomplished mage with witty banter and clever bon mots, and in no time had made friends with the time mage. Bard and Critical also made good impressions, helped along by the fact that they were interested in joining already. They were quickly persuaded to sign their names on the dotted line, and were shortly being welcomed into the organization and shown the ropes. They would have basic duties and introductory learning to do, but had no problem with the minimal, reasonable requirements for membership. During this discussion, Critical and Kitty asked about the other traditions, and got the official Celestial Chorus view, which was that all of the other traditions had every right to practice their beliefs. It was a free country, which included the freedom to be wrong about everything. But the chorus was at least civil about everyone else. We also learned some about the Marauders, the madness-ridden mages who had dropped the owlbear in the garden. Several of the tradition members were talking about the increase in attacks and the brazenness of their zooterrorism. It turns out we weren't the only ones having trouble with them, and we supplied the discussion with tales of the jumping marauder from our first adventure. Everyone thought that the increase in marauder attacks boded ill, but most assigned the blame to the zeitgeist. While the business end of things was wrapping up, and we were learning about all the new resources we could call on, Critical asked the hippie if he knew anything about fighting Bane spirits. The chorister had only barely heard of such things, but did say that there was a certain master of the tradition that liked to drop in on the parties unannounced. She wasn't affiliated with the DFW branch, living as she did in some magical realm separate from the mundane world, but there was a non-zero possibility that she would drop by if we made a good impression, and if we were very lucky. As it turns out, we were very lucky. As I always stood in a growing circle of mages, laughing, smiling, and charming the metaphorical pants off of everyone in the immediate vicinity, he noticed a small, wizened face appear next to his new Middle Eastern friend. A little old lady had appeared and was cackling along to Alwi's jokes and stories. It took a minute for most of us to realize that the woman was glowing. Not in the sense that she was pregnant, because she was far too ancient for that, but in the sense that she was giving off holy light. That made us suspect that she was the master. Alwi's new friend identified herself as the Bodhisattva. Tello, who had rejoined us by this point, had a few questions for the glowing lady. "Excuse me, miss, but which Bodhisattva are you?" "Well, all names and titles are illusion, so all Bodhisattvas are the same creature. So you could call me the Bodhisattva of Bodhisattvas. But it's just a name, dearie. Don't worry about it." "Aren't you in the wrong religion to be a monotheist?" "Well, if I was anyone else, I might take offense to that. But I serve the one, dearie. I just see us all as illusory fragments of the same one. What some might call nirvana, I call reunion. Fairly standard monotheistic mysticism, just with a Buddhist influence. But it's not like there's a test you have to pass to be in the Celestial Chorus. It's more about worldview and how you understand magic. If you see it as coming from a divine source, you're a chorister. Anything else I can clear up for you, dearie?" "No, that was it. Thanks." We were all a bit taken aback by Tello challenging a master at their own tradition's party, but we were pleasantly surprised by the old woman's frankness and openness. Our liking for her only grew as she started making dirty jokes and rude comments about some of the more self-important tradition members in attendance, treating us all like her old cronies. I guess when you have so much power that you radiate light, you no longer have to give a damn about anything. She especially took delight in Weeb and Alwi antagonizing the stern cleric, whose personal restraint and morality was the only thing keeping us from a nasty hex. Still, she liked ballsy people. We talked to her for a while about how to defeat Bane spirits and deal with other supernatural foes. She actually had little recipe cards printed out with instructions on how to complete rituals to make spirits manifest, which she gladly gave us. The backside had a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. We talked to the old lady for quite a while, enjoying her company and regaling her with stories of our mighty deeds and narrow escapes. Mostly the latter. She loved them and cackled at the appropriate places. She also gave us information on the technocracy, the traditions, the Nefandi, evil mages who serve destruction and decay, and many of the other potential dangers and allies that new mages might face. Finally, she left a business card with Alwi, offering to heal our worst wounds if we needed it. Then she stood in the middle of the room and slowly faded from sight, her smile and the smell of liniment oil lingering behind her for a moment. As we gathered up our things and said our goodbyes, Weeb made one last attack on his stern antagonist. As he walked by the cleric, he started humming a certain spectacular theme song, just to annoy the preacher. A look crossed the priest's face, and his hand twitched. Suddenly, Weeb's throat went dry, and he started to cough a bit. Recognizing the magical attack for what it was, Weeb locked eyes with his antagonist and punched himself in the throat, using the strike to channel his healing abilities. Impressed at his determination, if nothing else, the cleric gave an acknowledging nod and walked away. And with that, we left for the evening. We had made new friends, and our new enemies seemed more irritated by us than truly hostile, so we decided the evening had been a win. What new friends will the Iron Goldfish make? Are they finally safe from technocracy attack? And what is happening with the Marauders? Find out in the next Mage Storytime.